is it ever beneficial, maybe this is more towards the CPAs, the American CPAs, is it ever beneficial to own a company as well as to be self-employed, one specifically regarding Social Security, meaning that, well, I think actually the question is pretty self-explanatory. Do I have to? Okay, again, everyone not here understand the question. Is there any benefit as an American citizen to be both a company owner, so a sole proprietor, it's your own company, as well as to be self-employed? Let's pass the mic.
If your goal is to increase your Social Security benefits, then it's best also be self-employed also, which is exactly what we kind of did.
Yeah, so the idea being that, so we wanted to become a corporation, but maybe if you're making a certain level of income and you say, okay, now I want to become a company, okay, and avoid the paying the Social Security, then, but you still might want to finish your quarters, so you could leave your TEEC open, and you could still bill some from your TEEC, and in parallel still have the company. And on your self-employment income, you would report self-employment income and be subject to Social Security. So the answer is it really is an individual basis, but in some cases, people do it, yes.
Okay. Do you want to add anything to that? No? Okay. Another question we got beforehand, which I don't believe was answered. For people, everyone knows in Israel, you kind of, in order to make it work, many of us have to have multiple jobs. And the question I received was that when you have a second job, or maybe a second or third job, at what point is it advantageous, and this is, I think, more in Russell's domain, at what point is it advantageous to do tiyum mas? Tiyum mas, for those people that don't know, is where you have to basically tell Mas הכנסה that you'll be getting a tlush. Tlush is a salary stub. They'll be getting a tlush from multiple employers, versus when is it good to have just one tlush and then open up a TEEC as an atzmai? For example, I know that a lot of teachers do this because maybe they're lecturing at different schools. At the same time, they have their main school that they're working at. But I can envision it being relevant to a number of people.
Pass. No, seriously, that is a question better asked of your Israeli accountant, and your Israeli lawyer, or your U.S. accountant.
But we can. I'll just say that. If you have 3 or 4 tlushim, as far as the Americans are concerned, it's just an aggregate of all your income. There's no tiyum mas. We take all 4 tlushim, all 4 106s, add them all up, and that's your income. So, but Russell's right. You have to ask in the tiyum mas and how to work it all out. That's something you have to ask your Israeli accountant.
Thank you.
But at least now we know to ask. The questions I'm really interested to hear, but obviously we're going to open it up to any and all sorts of questions. Those people that are operating on both sides of the ocean. A lot of people have tried various things, whether it's setting up companies here in Israel, and then they build their American company. I would love to hear stories and questions based on that, not necessarily case studies, if you will, but with personal experience and questions based from that. So if you're maybe thinking of not answering a question, but you think that actually it might be relevant, please, we would love to hear from you. Meanwhile, let's open up the floor. Yes, in the back. Hold on for 1 second.
I have a question about the child tax credit. I know that there's a tax treaty, so you don't pay more tax than you would here, let's say. So if we have 3 children and we've already paid our tax to the U.S., to the Israeli side, and we get the child tax credit, does that mean the United States pays us money to file?
I'm actually gonna, if you can answer that maybe in just 10 seconds, only because that's not the focus of what we'll be talking about today. It was very important to hear the realm of areas that will be affected, but again, we want to focus on questions relating to operating your business, whether it be tax or legal, and specifically affecting running your business. That's more of a private question, a great question, but again, now I can hear myself in stereo. So if you just want to give a very quick answer, but really I'd like to focus more on questions about business.
Real quickly, yeah, you can file your taxes in America with the income that you earn here, and you'll still get back $1,000 per child in America.
Okay, next question. Dang it. Here we go.
I'll just say in respect to what you asked, I originally set up an Osek Patur, and when I started my business, I was actually advised to close it until I was earning. So, but I have a different question. It was just because I wasn't earning. So now that I want to set up a company,
answer from the legal side. The incorporation fee payable to the company's registrar, as I believe Shui mentioned, is approximately 2,600 shekel. The legal fees for forming an Israeli company are approximately 2,500 shekel plus VAT. There's no VAT on the incorporation fee. The annual registration fee for a company payable to the company's registrar, also as Shui correctly pointed out, is approximately 1,500 shekel. You get a lower rate if you pay by the end of February. I don't remember if the 1,500 is the pre-March or after March 1st rate. And as far as accounting fees for incorporating, I have no idea.
Yeah,
But they could run you 15 to 2,000 shekel a month as a corporation,
Yeah.
2,000 bookkeeping fees, not.
No, so
which also usually includes the annual audited financial statement at the end of the year.
right. As this is something which I help a lot of my clients with, I'll just give you a rundown very quickly of my experience. Again, so right away there's the fee to the registrar of companies. If it's your own company, you're the sole proprietor, it's really easy. Every company has what's called a bylaws, which is basically an agreement of how it will govern itself. When you're the sole proprietor, it's one sheet. It's like filling out Mad Libs for those people who remember that when they're kids. Literally, you fill out your name, you fill out the company name that you would hope to have, and you have a lawyer sign the bottom. Assuming that lawyers charge, give or take, anywhere between 70 to 150 shekel per signature. I think there were about 4 or 5 signatures that I had to get while forming my company. So again, we're talking about under 300 shekel, plus the opening fees of the 2,600. As for bookkeeping fees, when someone takes on the responsibility to do your bookkeeping, it will probably be, I know for myself, it is the single highest consistent fee I pay. Because again, everything else varies. I don't have to buy a new computer. I don't have to buy food for my office. I have to pay my accountant, and my bookkeeper, who's also my accountant, every single month. You can expect to pay anywhere from 700 shekel, which is the lowest, and that's really a handful. Most people are paying at least 1,000 to 1,500 shekel before VAT on a consistent basis. Now again, your accountant and bookkeeper could throw on additional services, such as doing your invoicing and billing. But again, your bare bottom is going to be 700, but really I would gear for 1,000 shekel or more. And then that's pretty much it. Another thing you're going to have to do to set up your company, this is not really, we talked about this in our last session, creating a digital office, is invoicing. So it will cost you, you have to buy the receipts. But essentially, receipts, bookkeeping, and setting up the company, and then you're pretty much good to go. Does that answer your question? Excellent. I told the gentleman agree.
One of the things you spoke briefly about was the idea of employee versus contractor. If you set up a company structure in Israel, but you're only working for one entity overseas, is there the potential for that to become an issue? Or does the company structure, in other words, is there the potential that you get deemed as an employee of that company, or does your company structure here basically insulate you from that possibility?
If you are the individual, in most cases, and you don't have your own business, but if you are an individual working for providing services to someone else, it's in your favor to be considered an employee because you will have the social benefits and the rights that accrue to an employee, including pension, etc. For that reason, from the other side's perspective, they will not want you, generally speaking, to be considered an employee because they want to avoid those obligations. If I understood correctly, you're proposing having an Israeli company for which you are an employee that's providing services to a U.S. entity. I don't find any likelihood that anybody would want you to be considered an employee of the U.S. company. That creates all kinds of complications for the U.S. entity, which would then be deemed to be doing business in Israel, having an employee there. That's not something they're going to want, and I can't imagine your company would want that either.
Here, stripes, and then the gentleman in the back, blue t-shirt, sorry, and then here, and then me. Okay, everyone remember their numbers, go for it.
I actually ended up a year ago opening a corporation for exactly that purpose. I have getting paid by a U.S. company, and I was told that I'd have to pay the 15% Social Security tax. Apparently, I was given the right information, and I'm paying a lot of accounting fees right now. My question is, what if I what if I decided to just be a W-2 employee? How would I pay my taxes here in Israel? Would I have to open up an Osek Moshe in order to have a mechanism to pay Israel? Like how?
Well, unfortunately, again, as they say, pass. That's a question for your Israeli accountant. But you will, if you are an Israeli citizen, you just like it used to be only in the States you were subject to worldwide income tax on your worldwide income. Israel, until a couple of years ago, was only subjecting Israeli citizens to tax earned or derived from Israel. After the law changed, Israelis are subject to worldwide tax on their worldwide income. So if you are living in Israel and earning income from the States or elsewhere, you are required to file a tax return and pay the tax.
You're not sure
What the mechanism is for doing so, I don't know.
What if you go through one of these payroll agencies that they have? Does that exempt you from Social Security?
It
Well,
does. It's a very big issue. We dealt with this last session. We had an accountant who was speaking specifically about the biggest one is called Ye'ul Sachir, which are companies that are formed specifically to sort of employ the self-employed, with the goal being, hey, you can get around a lot of the inconvenience of being self-employed if you become my worker. They've been sued. They've lost. They've since restructured, but basically, Mas הכנסה surprisingly said your whole company is fictitious, and the only reason why it exists is to get around doing what's legally you're responsible. To which I would say, check it out before you do it. Meaning, to answer your question, yes, it does get around it. It's not so simple though, and it's definitely something that I would.
U.S. Social Security?
It does. It does. Let's also give some.
The issue, by the way, that it was Bituach Leumi that brought the lawsuit, and the issue was whether or not those quote-unquote employees were subject to Bituach Leumi. Bituach Leumi, of course, said yes, and the court said we agree.
Yeah. You don't like to get sued as a general practice, so Bituach Leumi, Mas הכנסה. Who was the gentleman afterwards? Excellent. Yeah.
This is just a quick clarification question. If I recall correctly, on the slide where you defining employee, you mentioned no other additional income, person's not getting additional income, but getting back to the scenario where people are working multiple jobs, how strictly is that determined, and do you have to make specific provisions with an employer to be allowed to work businesses in order to retain that employee status?
Well, first of all, I'm impressed because I went pretty quickly over that slide. I'm pretty impressed that you picked up on that. What that slide was referring to was part of the definition of what is considered to be a freelancer independent contractor versus an employee. So one of the aspects that the courts are determined is whether or not the individual provides services, has the opportunity to provide services to more than one entity. That was the reference in that slide. So when determining whether or not the person is an employee or a freelancer independent contractor, so you look as to whether or not they are completely dedicated 9 to 5 and are prohibited from working for others, which most employment agreements will have a restriction in that, at least most employment agreements that I prepare for the employer. So in answer to your question, you would, regarding your employer, if you have a real employment relationship, you would generally need the written approval. The oral approval or approval hard to prove, but I would suggest you get the written approval of your employer before you provide services to somebody else. Hope that explained.
depending on the health of Social Security, when you
Assuming Social Security's still around.
yeah, you will collect as long as you. There's certain criteria. If everything stays the same, if you're not collecting a foreign pension, things like that, then you will get the maximum amount of your Social Security. But if you're starting to collect a foreign pension when you reach a certain age, your Social Security will be affected by that.
Okay, sounds like that was the answer. Who's next on the list? I can't remember. Okay, we still have about 15 minutes, so even though you're not on the list, we'll just make a note. Yeah.
Very general question. Isaac Moshe, somebody who's just starting out very small and could manage to do the bookkeeping himself, just starting out. What would be the recommended software to use that would be comparable to like QuickBooks Online, or if QuickBooks Online actually is compatible in Israel? If there's anything that just could be recommended?
When I started by myself, I just bought a booklet from the office store that just kept track of my income and my expenses. That's all I really did. I didn't have a separate like QuickBooks or anything like that. For tax purposes,
there are actually a lot of options available nowadays. Originally, the online options were just about invoicing and billing, because basically your bookkeeper was doing everything else. But actually, a lot of them have really grown beyond that. My personal favorite is Green Invoice, which is it's 17 shekel a month. Before that, for up to 50 documents, and it also handles. I've looked at a number of them for my clients. For me right now, it seems to be, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it as well. It seems to be, I find it to be the nicest interface. It lacks a little bit if you want to charge clients through credit cards. It's a little more limiting. The one that's best, because again, you can use now these things for everything, both your bookkeeping as well as charging as well as invoicing. And if you really want to offer a lot of credit card options, probably the best is iCount, but I find it to be much less pretty in terms of interface and Green Invoice. But there are, just to name a few, there's, you do a quick search, there are so many out there nowadays. Rifchit's very popular. It also has a much larger option, which a lot of the professional bookkeepers use. Rifchit, generally speaking, the more it does, the more complicated it might be to use. Rifchit's one of the bigger ones. Chashav Shevet, Shiklali are the big ones which the accounting firms use. You definitely probably want to stay away from there. Green Invoice, iCount. There are really so many. Just do a Hebrew search, and with this one, you'll go on to the next question. For Hanalat Cheshbonot, online, internet. And and again, if you want to email me, and so I can rack my brain when I'm not standing in a group of 40 people, I'll be happy to share with you my experience about that as well. Next question, I forget who we're at. Did we go through the people that I already told? Great, so we're going to start with sorry? We're going to follow up some new questions. So 1, 2, and we'll start from there. 3, the gentleman behind me is where? The woman, excellent. Okay.
I just wanted to ask if the bank hasn't approached you to fill out the W-9 form, is it better to approach them to fill it out, or is it like once first?
well, if you're a U.S. citizen, you might as well just fill it out. They're eventually going to ask you to fill out the W-9. So going in there and saying you're a U.S. citizen, I want to fill out the W-9 isn't going to do you any damage.
Are you reporting?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to, right? It's really for them to take the information and send it on to the United States. If you're reporting, from your aspect, you don't have to. Yeah.
From working the banking system for 9 years, in the last 6 years, having meetings with head of legal, head of compliance, they will find you. It's actually it's the first time I've ever heard someone's been like, well, the bank hasn't actually asked me for a W-9. Anytime you open up a bank account now, they're asking for your W-9.